Welcome to Shrimperscast with me, Paul Hill, and even more parliamentary candidates who are standing in the general election for Southend East and Southend West as they join me today on the final instalment of our digital hustings in collaboration with the Shrimpers Trust. Hello, and welcome back to Shrimperscast for this special edition digital hustings pod that we are hosting in collaboration with the Shrimpers Trust. Now, this is part two, the final instalment. If you haven't heard part one, please go back and listen to the candidates that we've already had on. We have had from Southend West, the Labour candidate David Burton-Sampson, the Conservative candidate for Southend West, Anna Firth, and from Southend East and Rochford, we had the Labour candidate Bayo Alaba and the Green candidate Simon Cross. Now, in the interests of democracy and impartiality, the very values and the cornerstone on which Shrimperscast was founded, we have got four more candidates joining us today. We've applied to everybody, every candidate that answered the press release, the email that the Shrimpers Trust put out, and the emails and the text and everything else that we sent out as well. And we've managed to lock in, like I said, another four candidates. Today, we are joined by the Conservative candidate from Southend East and Rochford, Gavin Haran. We are also joined by the Liberal Democrats candidate for Southend and Rochford, James Allen. We are also joined by the Liberal Democrat for Southend West, Stephen Cummins. And we are also joined by the candidate for the Convolicity Party in Southend West, James Miller. And just like yesterday, it's completely the same format. We haven't thrown in any curveballs or gone to VAR. It is going to be kicking off with the statements, and then the candidates will be answering questions from the constituents again, and questions from Andy Walsh, the head of National Game and Community Ownership at the Football Supporters Association, and Niall Cooper, the CEO of Fair Game UK. So just like the previous pod, this has the potential to be an absolute banger. So pop the kettle on, get comfy, bed in, pop your feet up, and without further ado, let's say hello to our candidates. Hello, candidates, and welcome to Shrimperscast. And we'll be kicking off proceedings with your statements. So let us begin with the Conservative candidate for Southend East and Rochford, Gavin Haran.
Firstly, thank you to the Shrimpers Trust and the fans for the opportunity to speak on the club and its future. Southend has many unique features: its proximity to the sea, to our capital, the pier, the airport, our history and heritage, tourism, and of course we've got the newly minted city status in Southend. But it's very clear that Southend United FC is both integral and fundamental to the city and its people. And as someone who's standing to be the new MP for Southend East and Rochford, and as a football fan, my starting point is that the club must be saved for the sake of the city and the community. We must do everything possible to ensure that it survives and flourishes. And my background is in finance and law, so that's my expertise in business. And while I'm coming to this situation and the deal fresh, it's clear to me that the outgoing chairman is bargaining the club to make a profit. And he's even pushing it to the point that the club itself might not survive. So what we need, and my starting point, is a viable deal and for the club to be sold and saved. And that is my ultimate and overriding concern. If I'm elected, I'll do everything I can to advocate for the club and for its fans first of all.
Thank you, Gavin. And we will bring in the Liberal Democrats candidate for Southend East and Rochford, James Allen.
Hello, my name's James Allen, and I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate for Southend East and Rochford. Let me say that this is not about me, but it's about you. This is for you to decide who you want to be your representative for you to decide who best reflects your wishes and desires. And let me be clear, I know we're living in troubling times. Things have got worse over the last 5 years for all of us. And for the first time in almost 2 generations, we're worse off now than we were when this Parliament started. And I think there are 3 issues that I consider to be important to myself. Those are the NHS, education, and the environment. I think most of us probably owe our lives to the NHS. So it's only fair I put that at the beginning. I think also, as a Liberal Democrat, we need to be looking at the front door. How do we get into the hospital, which is through the GPs, through the dentists? We need to look and work at how we can improve that, which is what the Liberal Democrats are suggesting they'll do. Also looking at education. I think it's most important that we have an educated population. But I do get very tired of politicians using education as a political football. I think we should have a curriculum that is set by educators and not by old white men that went to private schools. And finally, the environment. We live on a city that has the name On Sea in it. We shouldn't be dumping rubbish, sewage into that sea. But all 3 of those things actually come with an underlying common theme, which is infrastructure. We need new hospitals. We need to repair a number of schools. Sewage pumping stations need to be improved. So all of that investment needs to go into that infrastructure. And let me finally say that there's one thing that's not been mentioned much in this election, and I will mention it, Brexit. I would like to eventually go back into Europe, and I think that we need to be seen to be getting better. We need to be seen to be working with Europe to getting better trade deals. There's no point in pulling away from a trade deal and then finding we've got nothing else to fall back on. However, I will say now that it's not our decision to go back into Europe. It will be Europe's decision as to whether they'll allow us to go back in. So let me finish by saying that I see there are lots of problems, but these can all be overcome. And I want to say that for me, as an MP, it's constituency first, country second, and party a long, distant third.
Thank you, James. And now we will bring in the Liberal Democrat candidate for Southend West, Stephen Cummins.
Hi, I'm Stephen Cummins. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate for Southend West in Lee. Been in Southend for about 10 years, born in the UK, but grew up in Ireland, you can probably guess from the accent. Moved here 10 years ago when I did some work for the council and thought I'd do IT and thought it's a great place to live. I like being near the sea. It's not that expensive to live here. People are nice and friendly. So try to fit in. My daughter went to Eastwood Academy. I was a governor. I set up a resident association in San Remo Parade. Then I started the Dog Beach campaign. I started to study law when I became a magistrate. And the Lib Dems asked me to run for the council. Didn't win. And now they've asked me to run for Parliament. So here I am. A little bit about kind of what I'm standing for. I think it's the things that concern the people who live here. Cost of living is probably the worst thing. The hospital, problems with the hospital, lacking staff, lack of GPs, lack of dentists, those things are high on my list as well. Sewerage in the water is high on my list. And lately what's been happening to Southend United has been on my list. So they're the main things. But my job really as a MP is going to be your person on the ground, your champion, the person who can kind of use that bit of power and leverage to help you solve problems. I'm also very interested in helping people who have a disability, like myself, parents whose kids have learning difficulties. And as I said, just trying to do more for the people who generally don't have a voice and generally aren't listened to in our society, making it more of a liberal democracy again. That's what I'm here for.
Thank you, Stephen. And we will bring in the Confelicity candidate for Southend West, James Miller.
Hi, my name's James Miller. I'm the Confelicity candidate for Southend West and Lee. The Confelicity Party is a local party, a Southend resident party, and we like to think of ourselves as the local party for the national stage because everyone in Southend can come to our meetings and literally vote on our manifesto and put any policies they would like into it. And if it gets voted in, it goes through, and that's what we represent, or would represent in the Houses of Parliament, the House of Commons. So in regard to Southend United, I've lived in Southend my whole life. I used to play football as a boy for Southend Manor, and it was always a huge ambition of mine to play for Southend United. Never managed the feat, but Southend United has always been a big part of my life. I've ball boyed there, and I've played on Roots Hall as well. At Roots Hall as well, and is an amazing experience. So we've always looked up to Southend United as heroes and inspirations, and the community, whether you like football or not, everyone is affected by how Southend United do. People's jobs rely on it. So yeah, it's a hugely important part of Southend as a city, and in my opinion, we must do whatever it takes to keep it going.
Thank you, candidates. And now let's get stuck into our questions. Our first question is from Andy Walsh, who is the head of the National Game and Community Ownership at the Football Supporters Association.
The perilous position of Southend United Football Club is entirely down to the decisions of the current owner. Decisions that now threaten the very existence of the football club. Football clubs are one of the most significant representatives of the community in Southend and key to the cultural and economic health of the city. Yet this is now threatened. What will candidates do to protect football clubs should they be successfully elected?
Gavin.
Andy and the Football Supporters Association are absolutely right to point to the problems we're experiencing with Southend United and the chairman separating the club from its assets, from Roots Hall in particular. So what we really need to do is to legislate to stop that. It just simply shouldn't be allowed. And that's what the Football Governance Bill would do. And as I've said, I think it's really important that we've constructed that bill. The Conservative Party put out the white paper. The Football Governance Bill is in our manifesto. We will deliver it. And I'm going to advocate for that regardless of who is in government after this election. If I'm elected, I'm pushing for that bill to be done, and we need a strong rule that prevents chairmen, prevents owners from doing what we've seen happen here. Well, first of all, I would say if I'm elected as an MP, I view myself as a conduit for supporters in the community. First of all, you act for the people who elected you. Whether you vote for me or not, I act for the people who elect me, and that's who I'm accountable to. So what that means, most of all, I think, is being close to and listening to the supporters and using all of the avenues that I can possibly do, whether that's in Parliament, in government, locally, of course, with different bodies, community bodies and public bodies, the council, to amplify and advocate for the people in the community here, including supporters. I'm glad you mentioned other sports clubs as well, because I think, as somebody who grew up playing sports, who still now likes sports and fitness, who's got a young son myself, these are very important. I intend to be as close to sports clubs as I possibly can. And as I've said, I'm there to amplify your voice, not my own.
James Allen.
I think I've already mentioned it before, but I think the football club should be considered a community asset. And as such, schools and other gyms or whatever should be able to use the stadium for healthy kids. It should be multi-use, whether we have more than one game played there, whether they're stadium concerts, whatever. I mean, I did go many, many years ago to an England women's football match there. So we should be looking to bring these things to Southend. And other local clubs, let's face it, Great Wakering Rovers have done really well, and they've got a very, very small stadium, Great Wakering, but maybe some of their games could be played in Roots Hall as well. While I do not wish to discuss what is ongoing at the moment between the club, the owner, current owner, and the potential new owners, I think it's only fair to mention that how we would govern the football arrangements should there be a governance position in place. I think assets should be protected. I don't think they should be able to be split. We have to be careful about asset stripping. But it is a private company, and therefore we need to ensure that the owners of said company can operate as a private company. But there needs to be some arrangements to protect the club as well. And I think that's where there needs to be this very careful stepping stone between the two. And I don't think we can just ignore one at the risk of allowing something else to take over. Have to be careful there isn't too much regulation, otherwise people won't buy in, or we have to be careful that we can't allow just anyone to buy in. So it's a balance, and that's where I, as an MP, would be looking to make sure that balance is met. While I would put pressure on the owners of Southend United to speak to the club's fan base, I have to be careful again. This is a private company, and therefore, what in law does the owner have to say? Does the club have to say? Does the company have to say? I don't think you can necessarily put one set of laws in for this club and not for other private companies. So I think we have to be careful here. But are the fans shareholders, in which case they're allowed access to information? Should there potentially be a fan base as part of the ownership? We've talked about ownership and how that would work. Part of it, perhaps, as a regulator, is there should be a certain amount of fans on the board, which would allow them access to information. However, again, there has to be some careful, because the information given to those fans, though the board, could be confidential and therefore might not be able to be given outside of that, and therefore there needs to be some review of how that would work.
Thank you. And Stephen Cummins.
As an MP, I would boost community involvement, advocate for fan ownership or fan participation in how decisions made about the club, secure funding, do whatever I can to raise funds in Parliament, supporting youth programmes, encouraging partnerships between clubs and educational institutions, develop youth sport programmes and foster local talent, collaborate with local businesses, promoting collaboration between Southend United and local businesses to boost the local economy, creating jobs, to ensure fair revenue distribution, as I mentioned, to do with the TV and other revenues, make sure they're allocated to the lower league clubs such as Southend United, to help give us financial stability and competitive balance, and promote community outreach, support clubs like Southend United engaging in their communities' outreach programmes, social initiatives and events that strengthen community ties.
James Miller.
So with Confelicity, part of what we are trying to achieve locally is the idea of civic pride and having people around Southend as inspirational figures, so it builds some aspiration in the town and where people feel pride in Southend, and I think our sporting clubs are vital to that. As I said earlier, Southend United were heroes to me as a child growing up, and as an MP I would like to see all the sporting clubs being elevated to a position where in all the schools and colleges and all over town we could increase the significance of that. Fossett's Farm and Roots Hall and Southend United should have absolutely nothing to do with each other, and I always found being in business myself and having gone through all kinds of different negotiations, there are times where you'll ask for something, not really believing you're going to get it, you just ask for it. And I think what's happened here is they've asked for something that is essentially ridiculous and got it. And so, no, this should never, ever have been part of any deal. And unfortunately, I would never have backed what they've done. And it's got us into this position. So, no, I back any legislation to make sure that this could never happen again.
Our next question is from Noel Cooper, for the CEO of Fair Game UK. He asks, given the debacle at Southend, how would you propose improving the owners and directors test to ensure it never happens again? If you are elected, how would you ensure ministers prioritise the introduction of a football regulator, and crucially, a regulator that is fit for purpose and significantly stronger than the original proposal?
Thanks, Isnal. Yes, first of all, our experience here with Southend United is a prime case as to why the Conservative government had to move forward with the football white paper, with the football governance bill. And regardless of who is in government after this election, I'll be using the case of our experience here to make the case for that bill being passed as legislation as quickly as possible, and the creation of an independent regulator, because that's exactly what's needed. We cannot let owners regulate themselves in respect of their ownership of the clubs. Now, the regulator must have teeth as well. And I believe actually, Noel, that the bill does do that. It will be a regulator that has teeth. What is important, though, I believe, as MPs, we need to push them to be a strong regulator and set out the necessary guidance and standards that are needed after you have the legislation in place. So the bill is on our agenda. If the Conservatives are re-elected again, if I'm elected as an MP, we'll be pushing forward to do that as quickly as possible.
Thank you. And let's have James Allen.
As I said before, I'm happy to support the requirement for the football regulator. And I do believe that it shouldn't only be football, it should be other sports clubs should be included as well. And I think there should be also a voluntary sign up for other clubs, be they smaller or larger. I also think that there is a balance to be had between what is a private company and a private organisation, or an organisation owned by another company, that we could perhaps have requirements as to how far we can go and what we can do. We need to be careful. We need to ensure that we are not over-regulating. On the other side, we need to ensure that there is regulation. So I'm happy to push forward for further regulation, but bear in mind that we cannot have such regulation that would stop people joining and buying clubs.
Thank you. And Stephen Cummins.
Well, the whole idea is that the football governance bill will create the independent regulator, and the independent regulator's job is to make sure that the people who are put in positions of power, like owners and directors, are good custodians and will protect the fans and protect the club from irresponsible owners. Well, I think the main thing is that the legislation has to go through, it has to be put through. So as an MP, I have a part to play in voting for that, getting the bill through the various stages that it has to go through before it becomes law. Now, the important things that are in that bill are having a regulator. The regulator's job is to make sure that the various clubs have people running them who are running them for the right reasons. They're not just running them for their own personal wealth. They're running them for the benefit of the community, and then holding those people to account if they aren't running those clubs properly. That independent football regulator, as I said, will be independent. They have three primary objectives: to keep an eye on the club's financial soundness, protect it from to promote financial. They have to promote financial sustainability and ensure clubs take sensible financial decisions. They need to look at the long-term financial resilience, and they need to think about safeguarding the traditional features of the club.
Thank you, candidates. So our next question is Abby from Prittlewell, and she asks, considering the significant economic impact that football and Southend United have on our local economy, what specific strategies will you implement to support and enhance this economic contribution, ensuring that the club and associate businesses continue to thrive and benefit our community? Gavin Haran.
Thank you, Abby, for the question on the economic impact. So Southend United FC contributes about 10 million, it's estimated, in social value to the area. So that's, a significant and important amount beyond the less tangible elements, if you like, in terms of what the club has contributed to the people here, to the sense of community, cohesion, and to the history of the place. So as an MP, I could advocate for the club and its community in Parliament and with council and also with government departments, and that's what I'll intend to do. But I also mentioned my business expertise, and particularly in finance, law, and I intend to use that for the benefit of the whole area, including the club and the environment that it's in. And that means bringing in investment, both public and private. I want to tackle antisocial behaviour and crime, and that's why I am introducing up to 83 new police officers that are being trained up into the area to make it a safer environment. I want us to also have a fair share of the 2,000 new officers that are planned for Essex. But I also want to look at VAT and business rates, because that's really important in terms of local business, the ability of businesses to grow, to employ people, for us all to have more money in our pockets, ultimately, which can get spent in the local economy. So my aim and my expertise is really in growing the local economy, hopefully getting the cost of living down, and a better economy for all of us. And that's the petri dish in which the club survives and thrives. And that's what I intend to do.
Thank you. And let's have James Allen.
I think it's fair to say that we all recognise that there's a lot of money comes in through football into our economy. And how do we get more of that money? Now, I think we have a large stadium. That stadium should be used for more than just playing football. Obviously, got to be careful that we can't play other games necessarily on the pitch, but obviously rugby does come to mind. But even the big clubs have stadium concerts. So why aren't we? And we need to look at the whole area. Why haven't we got gyms in there? What about the club actually supporting people? The club's doing various things with schools' PEs, physical education lessons. We have a lot of knowledge and experience in the club. Let's use those to help kids. We know they're not getting enough healthy environment at the time. Let them go to the football club. Let them use that for PE. And I think also we should consider taking over the stadium as a community asset, although I will be very clear here, public money should be used very, very carefully, and we shouldn't be just supporting the club with public money. We should be getting something for that public money. That said, Southend Council have recently bought, I think it's the Victoria Shopping Centre, and they own the Royal Shopping Centre. So owning the stadium shouldn't be that big of a stretch for them. But I would say that if we own it, we then use it and make sure it is used constantly and not just once every 2 weeks for 20 or 25 weeks of the year.
Thank you. And Stephen Cummins.
Well, I think the first thing we've got to do is get the consortium owning and running the club. That's step one. I think if we can achieve that, it'll be huge. It means that the club will no longer be under the ownership of the Martin family. I think that's going to be very important because that's going to draw in more positivity from the fans, potentially more businesses getting involved. I think kind of the sort of thing we need is collaborations between clubs and local business, the club and local businesses, mutually beneficial economic opportunities, sponsorships, match day promotions, like you get 10% off a beer on the day of the match, or things like that. Promoting youth programs, I think, is going to be very important as well, fostering local talent, providing opportunities for young people. Apparently there used to be something called the boot and laces. I'd like to see that come back, but I don't know a huge amount about it. Somebody just told me about it. And just generally community outreach. Sport clubs are a very important part of the community. So charity events, initiatives that address social issues, like I mentioned, as I said, to do with the hospital, to do with people not having food, people with disabilities. I think there's an awful lot more that the community can do and a lot more that the club can do.
Thank you, Stephen. And let's bring in James Miller.
As a director of a family business in Southend, I am very well aware of the economic impact that all businesses across Southend have. We create jobs, we create wealth, and as soon as a business does fail, that has a huge knock-on effect on everyone else. So with Southend United, the same is true. We need to create a business environment conducive to make it easier to do business. We've got to try and drive the costs of doing business downwards as much as we possibly can. And that does come from government. You're talking about taxation, VAT, corporation tax, business rates, all these taxes that the government has control over. They could Southend United could well do with a lot of exemptions from all of this. And that is something that I would look to push for.
Jordan from Rayleigh, who asks, the recent football white paper outlines several reforms aimed at improving governance and financial stability in football. How will you ensure that these reforms are effectively implemented to safeguard not only the future of Southend United, but support the broader football community?
Jordan, thanks for your question on the football white paper. I'm very pleased to say the football governance bill is in the Conservative manifesto, and I support the completion of that bill. What it will do is to give clubs and investors in clubs greater certainty about the future. It should bring greater stability and governance to football clubs. And it will also create an independent regulator to oversee things and enforce them. And a lot of these aspects would have certainly helped resolve the situation that we see Southend United in at the moment. If we look at this generally, I mean, football, of course, is a big, important industry. We look at the economic up there, the amount of money flushing around in football, which we all know about. But also, of course, football matters so much to so many people, myself included. So what we're setting out in this bill, I think, is absolutely a necessary step. My experience actually professionally is partly in financial regulation. And similarly, of course, the financial sector is, a lot of money passes through it, and it's ultimately important to everyone. It's important if you're running a business. It's important if you've got a mortgage. It's important if you're trying to, raise money to survive and thrive. And that's where we are in football, of course, as well. So what I want to do is to bring my experience in regulation to the football sector and help inform that debate around the bill and how we can make it work well.
Thank you. And let's have James Allen.
I've looked at the white paper, and I have to say the one thing that surprises me about this white paper and how it's looking at governance is that a lot of the requirements are backwards looking. So it's looking at money that's come in, it's looking at what's happened. It's like any director of a company. You're looking at what's happened in the past, not what's happening in the future. And I do think there ought to be something far more clear about how we manage something in a real-time basis. And I would be happy that there'd be some form of almost constant updating going through to the football regulator, particularly if there was some form of concern. I also think that the way to come in to be a director of a football club, one would ask, why aren't we doing that for almost any other clubs? Because it's not only football clubs that have these problems. But I think the governance should be such that it's real time, on top, and there should be a set of requirements for each club set at whatever level it is to ensure that there's always buffers for cash flow, protection of the core assets. And again, we have to be careful because these are private clubs, so it's not the kind of thing you can just walk in and take away, but there needs to be some form of risk associated with the ownership. And now whether that's a bond that is placed before the start of the takeover or not, I don't know, but those are the kind of things that I would like to see.
Stephen.
So getting the football governance bill through the House is the first thing. The job of an MP is to vote for it, to make sure that it's tabled, make sure it's prioritised on the floor so that the other MPs can vote on it, get it a majority and get it through. It then goes back and forwards in various stages between committees and the Lords, etc. So it's all about keeping an eye on the bill and making sure it gets to the end and becomes law. So that's really what an MP can do in relation to specifically bringing in the reforms that are in that white paper.
Thank you. And let's bring in James Miller.
The paper looks really good. I like the way it looks to add regulation for the owners in particular, and I like the way it is trying to ensure that financial stability is there, and I like the way that it could never let another situation like the one going on with Southend United happen. There shouldn't be a deal with Fossett's Farm and Southend United should be absolutely nothing to do with each other. And so I do like the way that it will oversee that. The question was also, how would I support it? Well, as an MP, I would hope that I would be part of helping Southend United in their governance, and I would really regularly check in and to ensure that everything is being done as it should be done.
Andrew from Southend asks, what steps will you take to ensure that Southend United has the necessary infrastructure and support to thrive, including improvements to stadium facilities and partnerships with local businesses and educational institutions?
Andrew, thanks for your question about Southend United and infrastructure. And I'm thinking, of course, of Roots Hall itself. I'm the MP is actually in a very privileged position in the sense that if I'm elected, of course, I'll be able to advocate with public bodies, and that means not least government itself, whoever is in government, and council, whoever's running the council. So we're in a very privileged position to be able to do that, and that's what I would intend to do. But we also need to look at private investment, and I think when we look at the infrastructure around the football club, and not just tied to the football club itself, but the environment in which the community and the club exist, we need to bring in private investment. And as I've mentioned, that's my area of expertise. It's going to require vision about the area and business, and it's going to require some negotiation, but that's what I hope to bring to these problems.
Thank you, Gavin. And next up, we have James Allen.
As I mentioned before, I think potentially the stadium should become as I said before, I think the stadium should become a community asset. And in doing so becomes far more than just a stadium for football. Other things should be undertaken. That stadium is a lot of time and air to sit there and costs a lot just to sit there and not actually do much. So I think we should be doing a lot more with that stadium. And again, local businesses, educational institutions. And I think we should work with schools, as mentioned. I think there's not enough PE for children, whether it's an after-school club, whether it's a preschool club, whatever. I think there should be more dealt with by the club, looking at and bringing in children and adults. And let's face it, they have gyms. We've got lots of training areas around the town. And I think the local businesses could perhaps use those as well, whether they're private companies. The park runs, let's face it, they do these kind of things. So I think there's a lot we could do with the facilities, whether they're taken over by the council and then run through the council, I don't know. But again, being a private company, we have to make sure that these things are set in place and done correctly.
Thank you, James. And next up, Stephen Cummins.
Well, I think that's mainly down to the consortium because they're going to own and run it. I think my job will be to act as a conduit between them and the local council, because we have Lib Dems there in a coalition with Labour and Independents. So it's going to be about creating opportunities to help the local businesses, help local education institutions, help the club. And as I said, anything I can do to help raise funds through Parliament for the club, I will certainly do that.
And our final question is from Joanna in Lee, and she asks, with the substantial revenue generated from TV broadcasting deals in football, how will you advocate in Parliament for a fair distribution of this money to support lower league clubs like Southend United and ensuring financial stability and promoting competitive balance? Gavin, Haran.
Joanna, you've hit the nail on the head in terms of TV broadcasting deals. Now, if we just look at the revenue split, if you look at the revenue allocated for broadcast deals to the Premiership as compared to the National League, we're looking at 7,000 to 1. Now, if you look at attendance at matches, so how many fans are turning up, it's 45 to 1. So the split of money that's being distributed is not in any way comparable to the numbers of people that are turning up for matches. So that is, I think, very bluntly stated, unfair. What we must do, I think, and it comes back to the importance of the football governance bill, is that we need a regulator that is empowered to act and to act strongly on this, which is why I believe it's so important. We've got the Football Governance Bill and the Conservative Manifesto, that we published the white paper and we're pursuing it. And again, to reiterate my expertise, I want to bring it into this area to ensure we get the bill done as quickly as possible. It becomes legislation and we push the regulator to act strongly.
Thank you very much. And James Allen.
I think it's only fair to say that the football clubs do get an awful lot of money. And in fact, some of the clubs can only survive on the TV income. It's noticeable that a number of Premier League clubs have lost points. Nottingham Forest for one, Everton potentially for a second. And even Man City, I think, are having problems with their accounts. Football is not necessarily a winning formula, given the vast amounts of money that is paid to people. So the money coming in needs to ensure financial stability across the teams, across all the leagues. And it's that I think is most important. I think there should be a set fee, depending on which group you're in, but also there should be a hardship fund that's set up to protect. Now, that might also be working with the governance and on the white papers brought up and the regulator to ensure that there are other people ready to step in at a moment's notice. Maybe it's the hardship fund that buys it and somebody else can buy it from that. But yes, I think there is so much money in this game that's flowing around that's not going to where it should be.
Stephen.
Well, how we do that is propose revenue sharing laws. Push for laws that ensure TV money is shared fairly all the way down the football pyramid, helping lower league clubs get their fair share. Also in Parliament to create a support fund for helping lower league clubs using a proportion of this vast TV revenue. Already mentioned pushing for an independent regulator, support setting up an independent body to oversee fair distribution of funds, ensuring transparency. It facilitates stakeholder talks, bring together the top leagues and the lower leagues to agree a fair revenue sharing and highlight success stories so that we can set a strong case for fair revenue distribution to teams like Southend United.
Thank you. And let's bring in James Miller.
So at the moment, as we know, the Premier League gets significant amounts of money, and really all the other leagues don't get anywhere near the amount. I mean, if it was up to me, it should probably be the reverse. Now, we know that's not possible, but I would certainly advocate a much fairer distribution of the TV money that comes in.
And that concludes our digital hustings. So we'd just like to say a big thank you to all of the candidates that replied to our emails and our texts and got involved. We really appreciate your time and we wish you all the very best in the upcoming election, because it is very, very important what is going on at Southend. It just does not affect our football club. It affects every football club in the country, and all eyes are on Southend United at the minute and their takeover, especially going in with the legislation, with the football governance paper as well. And we're just going to end it now with a little message from Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester.
So Ron Martin needs to sell up straight away and let the takeover go through. I support everything the Labour Council's doing in Southend to save the great Southend United. I've been down to Roots-Hall myself. I know what a traditional club it is with proper supporters. They deserve better than this. So Southend United Supporters Trust, I'm all behind you.
Nice one, Andy, and congratulations on making your Shrimperscast debut. Top work, mate, top work. Anyway, well, that's it from us now. All that's left to say really is a huge thank you to the Shrimpers Trust for asking us to be involved in this excellent digital hustings. Huge salutes to Liam Ager for coming on, and to Sam Duckworth and Mike Patterson for helping us pull this together in such short notice. And well, wherever you are and whatever you're doing over your summer holidays, I hope you enjoy it, and we look forward to being back with you, hopefully talking about new signings and wonder goals and wonder saves and horrendous trips up north following the mighty Southend United. Have a great summer. Up the Blues.